Hey everyone, how you doing? Thanks for checking in. Thanks for those of you that are following along. I've been getting the good feedback from you and some of your questions. I appreciate that. Keep them coming. Feel free to comment below with your questions or comments, or send me an email or direct message. But just wanted to continue with lesson number three. There's two prior ones. If you want to check them out in the video archives, feel free to do so. I know a lot of you can't get on here for the live stream, but they are always available 24/7. So let's get to it. We're going to review. First of all, first review for tonight is we're going to review the first lesson, and that is really quickly we're going to talk about, remember, the difference between developing post-traumatic stress symptoms versus post-traumatic growth symptoms, and what is the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder and what is the difference between post-traumatic growth. And we don't hear a lot about post-traumatic growth, but really it's a very common phenomena that we all experience in our life. How many people have something in their life where they say, wow, that was awful, I would never like to go through that again. However, somehow, some way, even though I wouldn't do it again, even though I wouldn't subject myself or anyone else that I love to that experience ever, somehow I have no regrets. I am glad that I went through it because it's made me the better person that I am today. Well, that's post-traumatic growth, and there's looks lots of different ways. And sometimes we have PTSD before we have PTSD. We have post-traumatic stress before we have post-traumatic growth. But the difference between whether or not I develop post-traumatic stress disorder, which is basically the alarm system of our brain getting stuck on, we get stuck in states of fight, flight, or freeze, anger, fear, depression. The difference between getting stuck there for a length of time that is counterproductive and really has an incredible impact on our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. The difference in mindset between someone who gets stuck in post-traumatic stress and someone who moves on through to post-traumatic growth is that we either from the beginning or somewhere along the way, usually somewhere along the way of that struggle, come to a place where we say, okay, I need to lean into this. I need to embrace this as a challenge, as an opportunity. What is the opportunity here? What can I learn? How can I grow? How can I thrive? How can I become the person that I need to become in order to no longer be disturbed by this experience? Okay? So that's the mindset. The mindset of someone who is going to stay stuck in post-traumatic stress is someone that is feeling overwhelmed. And we all feel overwhelmed sometimes. I'm not shaming PTSD. I'm not, that's not the point here. But the point is that transition from PTSD to PTG is when we start to say, okay, how am I going to use this? How am I going to use it as a challenge and as an opportunity? Instead of feeling like all of my adversity is a threat that overwhelms me and I need to fight, flight, or freeze, I need to anger, fear, or depressed, then I'm going to start to meet this. I'm going to start to meet it as a challenge and as an opportunity. And I'm going to start to use it as the very fuel for my thriving. One of the quotes that I like is that we rise on the ground over which we once stumbled, and we turn stops into steps. And we do so by looking at that adversity as a challenge, as an opportunity, and even certain way we are grateful for it. And again, I'm not saying that any of us should subject ourselves to unnecessary pain or difficulty, but this mindset is the key for our thriving and not just surviving, okay? So in lesson 2, we talked about the foundation of meditation. We talked about extra and open attention. We've been doing daily meditations at 9 in the morning, Mountain Standard Time, for 10 minutes with extra and open attention, and also fog breathing. So we talked about how in the nervous system, how we are going to be going into states of fight, flight, or freeze, anger, fear, and depression when we are sympathetic nervous system dominant, okay? Don't need to know the technical terms, but every single time we breathe in, we activate the sympathetic nervous system. Every single time we breathe out, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And we are going to be thriving when we are parasympathetic nervous system dominant. Both the SNS, sympathetic nervous system, and PNS, parasympathetic nervous system, both of them are essential. They're both working all the time together in unison. But for our intents and purposes, we can talk about being PNS dominant, which is basically like most of the time we're relaxed, we're open, we're thriving, we're happy, we're joyful. And every once in a while we snap into stress mode, SNS dominance. And it should be like, it's more like a 99% thriving and a 1% stress mode. But a lot of us have that ratio switched. And we're more like 75, 80, 90% of the time we're stressed out. And only about 5 or 10% of the time are we thriving. Well, we can do something about that. Remember, so getting back to the fog breathing is every single time we inhale, we activate the SNS, the sympathetic nervous system. Every single time we exhale, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So then, by nature, we can use our tools, the tools of our body, mind, and spirit, to influence our nervous system, to influence our heart, to influence our guts. And we can, and one of the most effective tools is not anything new that I'm telling anyone, is the breath. And why is that? Because the breath is something that our autonomic nervous system regulates for us. This deep part of our brain regulates for us. And if we forget to breathe, we'll keep breathing, thankfully. You don't have to remember to breathe. However, if we take over the breath, we can influence this deep part of the brain where this alarm switch, whether or not we go into survival or thriving, where that alarm switch lives. So the fog breath looks like this, just for a quick review. Like I'm fogging my glasses, right? So the inhale is quick and full, belly, chest. And the exhale is as long as you can get it. You're trying to create a ratio of shorter inhale to longer exhale. Without struggle, without strain, all relaxed, all soft and loose, but allowing that exhale to extend longer and longer, and you're going to activate more of the parasympathetic nervous system, and you're going to get yourself into a mode where you can actually thrive and heal, okay? So that's that. Then we also talked about extra and open attention, and I'm going to move on a little bit from that. You can go back and look at the videos. That's in video number 2, the foundation of meditation. That is available from a couple weeks ago in the video archives on the Facebook page. Okay, so what is on my mind for today is just a little bit of normalizing, a little bit of like, okay, we're how many weeks into this little quarantine experiment here? And I just wanted to say that everybody I know, whether it's client, friend, family member, myself, is struggling a bit. Everyone is feeling it, feeling it in one way or another. And usually we're feeling it in a place where we already had a bit of a vulnerability, right? So if we were already tended to be anxious or tended to be hypochondriac, then we will feel it there. Or if we already tended towards anger, or we already tended towards impulsivity and addiction, or we already tended towards depression, we'll tend to kind of go in that direction. Because the pressure is raised, okay? So I just want to say, we're learning tools here to make the best of the situation and to try to get us into a state of post-traumatic growth instead of a state of post-traumatic stress, because this is traumatic in some ways for lots of people, and for others, way more traumatic than it is for some. But still, the principles are the same. How can I use this as a challenge and as an opportunity? And so, some people have been poking fun at my beard, and I'm saying, well, it's my playoff beard. And so the sports analogy is, I grew up playing a lot of sports, and I still am very fond of athletics. And so in the playoffs, a lot of times, particularly in ice hockey, which is the sport that I grew up playing, these guys would grow these big gnarly beards during the playoffs as kind of like a symbol of like their commitment to just that this is a long process It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and we're going to pull together as a team, and we're going to go for this thing, the Stanley Cup. And so it's a playoff beard, and it's a common thing in hockey and has become common in other sports, but hockey started it because it's the best sport in the world. And so what I've been saying is I've got my playoff beard on because this is really like the playoffs for mental health. To be home, to be alone, to not have all of our external pursuits, our normal identities, the things that we typically distract ourselves with, the things that we pursue that gives us a sense of meaning and purpose, social interactions, all these things. And so as a mental health professional, this is the playoffs for me because I need to step up my game to be at a championship level. And I need to look at it as an opportunity of how do I emerge from this quarantine? How do I use quarantine to become more loving, more kind, more aware, more joyful, more grateful, more open, more giving? And there is absolutely work to do there, right? Because who hasn't, been a little bit edgy? Who hasn't gotten a little bit afraid? Who hasn't gotten a little bit depressed and discouraged? Who hasn't maybe barked at their kids a little bit or gotten a little bit of a struggle with their partner or felt like, oh my God, I'm so alone. When is this ever going to end? Or been, maybe attacked a bag of potato chips that didn't do anything to deserve such treatment. We're all doing this type of thing. So this is the playoffs of mental health, right? And so I came across something called the Stockdale paradox over the week, and I wrote about it, and some of you might have read about it. And basically this is a little bit paradoxical, hence the term, especially for what you would think I would be presenting, which is basically saying that in really awful situations, and this Stockdale paradox came out of someone who was living in war, prison, torture camp. So I'd say, fairly adverse circumstances that might cause some of us to cringe a little bit. This person basically looked and observed, he survived, and then he observed and said, people wanted to know, well, what's the difference between people who made it and people who didn't? And he said the optimists die. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. The optimists die. So, but if you look a little bit more, what he really meant was that those with false optimism died. The people that were imprisoned for a long time, and they had in their mind this optimistic attitude of like, it's going to be over. It's going to be over next weekend, or it's going to be over at Easter, and I can't wait to see my family, and it's going to be, then Easter comes, not over. And then, speaking of which, Easter came, not over. Thanks. But this idea of setting false hopes, a false sort of optimism. He said this crushed people's spirits in these situations, and so the looking forward to something false and hoping for it, and then it didn't come, and then it didn't come true. He said that crushed people's spirits, and it was that killed them. It wasn't the torturers. It wasn't the malnutrition. It wasn't illness. It was mostly that people their will to live would falter, and they would die. And so what he talked about instead was what I'm thinking is a real optimism. And he basically is like an absolute enduring faith that I am going to be okay no matter what. Plus a willingness to look at things exactly as they are without sugarcoating. That is what had people survive those very difficult circumstances. Now, thankfully, we're not in a prison torture camp. Some people are undoubtedly in worse situations than others. There's no doubt about that. So my heart goes out to those people that have, sick relatives, that have lost loved ones, that are living in places where they're cramped, that are in unhealthy or unsafe living situations, be it substance abuse, domestic violence, or unsafe parents, or something like this, or on the 33rd floor of a high rise in New York City and can't get fresh air, can't get green grass. Absolutely, to any of you who are listening, the bar is raised for you. It's really the playoffs for you. It's go time. And so for the rest of us, though, that are maybe a little bit luckier, it's important for us to recognize that. It's important for us to recognize that and recognize, like for me in my life, and I realize that I'm probably on the top end of lucky spectrum. So I'm not sitting here trying to preach from a position of privilege and say that, oh, look at me, look at how great I am, because I'm still having a hard time on some days, and I have pretty sweet circumstances, okay? But any fear that cripples me, anything that really gets me down, is a story. No one around me has the illness. My kids, my family's safe. We have food, we have shelter, we have beauty. I can go outside my house and take a walk. And so that is really also important to remember. That is looking at things as they are. That's not burying my head in the sand. That is paying attention to what's actually happening in my life, which is, okay, yeah, it's a little claustrophobic. Yeah, my kids are really getting a little annoying. The house is a mess. I do the dishes 5 times a day and, sweep 10 times a day and tidy up 50 times a day and cook a bunch of meals and never-ending, food preparation and food putting away and changing diapers and all that. But still, that's okay. That's okay. That's a relatively good situation. So the idea is to look at things exactly as they are, with a faith that I will be okay no matter what. I will be okay if I get the illness. I will be okay if I have to stay in my house. I will be okay if this lasts a year, if it lasts 2 years. That is what the Stockdale paradox says is what gets people through these difficult times, is a willingness to really embrace and really accept and really lean into things exactly as they are, plus a faith of I will thrive no matter what. Okay? And so how we do that from the tools that we're talking about is to have that mindset of what is my challenge, what is my opportunity, okay? And so the tool that I want to add to the toolbox today is something called priming, okay? And some of you that work with me know what this priming is, but I just want to do a little example of just how priming works, this concept that we're going to talk about. And priming works like this. Just look around the room right now. Just look around the room. Okay? Now, as you're looking around the room, white. Notice the color white. How about red? Okay? How much white and red is popping out at you now? Even now that I'm saying it even more, you're going to notice, oh, there's white there. Oh, there's there. Oh, there's white there. Oh, there's white there. Oh, there's white there. Oh, there's different shades of white there. That's called priming. I just prime my brain to notice white, okay? And so our brain is going to notice whatever it is primed to notice. It's going to notice whatever it is primed to notice. Again, look around and see the white jumping out at you. It was always there. It was there a minute ago, but now you're noticing it. And so what we focus on grows, and this is essential. This is an essential reminder for those that have heard it before. What we focus on grows, and this is where it takes a discipline. It takes to look at what we need to look at and to not look at what we don't need to look at. What do we need to know? What can we find out? How long does it take to find out what you need to find out in terms of how things are going in the world right now on the quote-unquote news? 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Doesn't take much longer than that. Every once in a while, you might want to do a little deeper dive into some more long-term articles that are talking about like some of the different dynamics that are going on. But the more we focus on the horror stories, and hopefully we don't have to focus on horror stories because they're not in our homes. And if that is the case, that's a different story. So I'm kind of talking to people right now that are not in immediate crisis situations with friends or family members or themselves, etc. But I'm talking about those of us that are, struggling with this thing a little bit, but in relatively healthy, safe conditions, okay? And so what we look at in order to, so what do we need to what do we need to focus on there? Okay? And so if we focus on the horror stories, it is going to light up the nervous part, the sympathetic nervous part of our brain. The thing about our brain and our body is that every single time we think a thought, we create a chemical. That chemical courses through our body, and that chemical literally becomes our body. So people say we are what we eat, but really we are what we are. We are our state of being, and our cells are swimming in a neurobiological chemical cocktail 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So even if you are doing a little bit of comfort overeating these days, how many times a day do you eat? Well, how many times a day are you in a state of being? You're always in a state of being. So that state of being is the number one influence in your life. It is the number one influence on your body. It is the number one influence on your immune system. So if I'm constantly looking at the mounting death toll, if I'm constantly looking at the relative anomaly circumstances, if I'm constantly looking at those things, well then I am going to be creating a state of being that puts me into survival mode, into fight, flight, or freeze. And as we discussed in the first lesson a couple weeks ago in the PTSD versus PTG lesson, as we discussed, that actually decreases my immune system. That actually is not only counterproductive to having a healthy, happy, reasonably joyful time of life with our family, with whatever circumstances that we're in, but it actually makes me more susceptible to illness. Now, I'm not trying to create guilt and shame as a motivator here either, or fear as a motivator, but I am trying to say what we focus on will grow. What we focus on is important. It does make a difference. So for those that aren't familiar with the concept of protecting your mind, this is a very important concept, to protect your mind. It doesn't mean burying your head in the sand. It doesn't being in denial of what's going on. Like I said, with the Stockdale paradox, you need to embrace reality as it is. But that doesn't take that long. So, and looking at things actually as they are. Like the other day, I looked at the statistics in New Mexico because I really want to have my finger on the pulse of what's actually happening. There's been about 650 deaths in New Mexico. And my heart goes out to every single one of those people and all of their family members. And that is tragic. It's awful. There's no doubt about it. And if I focus on each one of those things, I am going to be influencing my nervous system in a certain way. So I want to touch in with that. I want to be open to that. I want to be loving. I want to be compassionate. I want to be empathetic. I want to follow whatever steps and procedures I think I need to follow to be a responsible citizen. And I also then want to look at, there are 2.1 million residents. So forget even looking at the rate of like the quote unquote death rate of the illness. What about looking at how many people there are? So 650 people of 2.1 million means 1.0004% mortality rate. It means, and again, I'm not one of these people I'm not a virus, I'll come right out there, I'm not a virus denier, I'm not a science denier, I'm not a social distancing protester. I think we should be doing the things that we're doing right now, and I think that will evolve as we gain more information, more technology, and we can evolve with those changes and with those improvements. But it's 1 out of 25,000 people. That's pretty good odds. And if I focus on that, I can breathe a little easier as a recovering hypochondriac. I can breathe a little easier, okay? So that is priming. How do I choose to prime my brain? I'm the one who gets to choose how I prime it. What I focus on, what I prime my brain to notice, it will notice more of. If I think about white, I will notice white. If I think about death, I will notice death. If I think about anxiety, I will notice reasons to be anxious. If I think about depression, I will notice reasons to be depressed. And so too, if I think about joy, love, openness, kindness, gratitude, and I am not talking about the denial kind. I'm not talking about the condescending, new age, everything is all love and light, and poo-poo for those of you that suffer, like you're not as evolved as me. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being in touch with things as they are, which means that people are suffering and people are having a hard time. And I can be one of the ones that's contributing to the solution, contributing to the upliftment of others. If I'm not in a difficult situation, then I can be doing things like this. I can be trying to help people. I can be using my time to my advantage so that I'm not feeling sorry for myself, so that I'm not actually becoming a burden on society, so that I am actually thriving body, mind, and spirit, and I can be ready to help if that opportunity comes up. And I can be ready to talk to a loved one or a relative that's maybe struggling worse than I am. And I can be building my immune system. I can be being productive. I can be being a positive contributor in the context of the reality of the situation. Okay? So, this is how I prime myself with these questions. And I wrote a little manifesto to myself the other day, and I was thinking about reading it. And now I don't have it in front of me, so that's not going to happen. But you can read it on the Facebook page if you want to. That was actually a letter to myself to encourage myself to get myself out of a little slump. And that letter to myself, I think it starts with something about a credo to inspire and loving or something like that. And that letter to myself is something that I think is beneficial to others, so I shared it. But the pith of it is this. In any given moment, I can ask myself, is this thought, is this feeling, is this emotion, is this perspective, is this plan, is this conclusion, is this decision, is this judgment I'm making loving? Is it loving to myself? Is it loving to others? Is it loving to all? And if it doesn't meet all those criteria, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. If it meets all those criteria, boom, go for it. So doing this, is it loving to myself? Yeah, I enjoy doing this. Is it loving to others? Yes, I love you all, and I hope that you get one little bit of information here that serves you. Is it loving to all? Absolutely, because the ripple effect. What if you take this, and what if you go, and what if it goes, and what if it, and what if it just spreads, right? And what if it shares? And so yeah, loving to self, loving to others, loving to all. So I prime myself with questions, okay? So let's just do it. Let's just take a little minute and we'll practice, because we only have 2 more minutes. I promised I would keep these to 30. So just get a comfortable seat and just invoke that extra and open attention. If you don't know exactly what I'm talking about with that, you keep watching and you'll learn in the next couple episodes or the regular daily meditations that we do, or you can go back and look at the video archives. But extra attention is the feeling of sensations in my body, the livingness in my body. I feel my heart beating, I feel warmth, I feel tingles, I feel aliveness all in my body. And it's the awareness of the space all around my body. Space in front of my body, to the sides, behind me, above and below me. And now I'm going to take a fog breath. Inhale. Again. Okay. As my mind starts to settle down, my body starts to settle down, then I start to just notice the sensations in my body and the space around my body. And I just ask myself, how could I be more loving today? What if I primed my brain for love? What if I looked for love when I got online? What if I looked for love in the stories that I read? What if I looked for love in the things that I think about? What if love isn't the virtue that grabs you? Love is the virtue that kind of really grabs me. But what if it's kindness? What if I looked for kindness? Just like the color white, what if I prime my brain for kindness? And what if what if it was gratitude? What if it was... Sorry, that's my alarm. What if it was gratitude? What if it was resilience? What if it was faith? What was it? What if it was compassion? Whatever, I'm just listing a lot of options for you because, whatever works for you works for you. But this is how I can use my brain the way it works. The nervous system is going to be primed no matter what. It's either going to be primed by the news, by the government, by your history, by trauma, by circumstances, or it's going to be primed by you. And if you prime it, then you get to dictate what is the major influence in your life. If you're in a state of being 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that means your cells are living in your state of being. They adapt to your state of being. And so they become accustomed to your state of being. If you want to feed your cells, your brain, your neurology, your biology, your chemistry, then you can influence your nervous system by priming it with what you value and choose. And that gives you the power, not the news media, not Facebook, not me, not your mommy and daddy, not your psychotherapist, not your past. You choose. And as my wife would say in her beautiful song, choose love. I choose love, so I choose to ask myself, is this loving to myself? Check, proceed. Is this loving to others? Check, proceed. Is this loving to all? Check, proceed. That's the trifecta. That's what I'm going for. That's what floats my boat. That's what gives me a sense of purpose and meaning. That's what gives me joy. So I'm going to go for that. And I'm going to go for that full tilt. And if it's a no on any of them, I don't beat myself up. I don't shame myself for that. I'm not yet an unconditionally loving being. That's okay. Where I am not yet unconditionally loving is my opportunity to grow. And that comes back to the very first point. If I see it as an opportunity, I turn the stop into a step. If I see it as a threat or as a failure and I beat myself up, then I go into the shame spiral and I go more into fight, flight, or freeze, and I go more into sabotaging my path to awesomeness. So, ask myself, is it loving to myself? Is it loving to others? Is it loving to all? If I get a yes on all three, I'm full steam ahead. If I get a no, I stop, I pause, I work, I transform it. How do I let this go? How do I let go of that limitation? How do I add a little bit more love? What do I need to do? What do I need to think about? Maybe I need to do a breathing exercise. Maybe I need to do a visualization. Maybe I need to think about things in a different way. Maybe I need to read, whatever, any tool that I can use to turn that no into yes, so that I can proceed in a way that is loving to myself, to others, and to all. All right. Love you all. I'm over time. All right. That's the fog breath. Go check it out if you don't know what I'm talking about on the first video entitled PTSD versus PTG. Have a great evening, everybody. Love you very much. Daily meditations, 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. 10 minutes. Ciao.